Hello everyone and welcome to week 5. In this video we'll be focusing on the third phase of the design cycle, which involves the creation of digital assets that you can use in your design artifacts. Our inspiration for today is brought to us by John Nichols of PhotoLogic. I chose this image for this week's video as we are starting to create some visual pieces and thought that this might provide an example of the simple ways that color, texture, and lighting can be used in a design artifact. The questions that will guide us in our exploration this week are: what are the principles and elements of design, and why are they important for creating digital content? How does digital technology support visual design, and what is the role of multiple mediums? What is the role that emotion plays in media experiences and learning, such as the psychology of color? And what is the role of continuity in design artifacts? To first start off, I'd like to talk a little bit about why the design principles and elements are important for creating content for learning. There are many examples that we can look at, but I'd like to take a look at this PowerPoint slide, for lack of a better word, which some people may refer to as ugly, depending on your perspective. Now, we can look at the visual design, or lack thereof, in this piece and use this as an example of how a ugly, quote-unquote, design can actually interfere with communication. As noted in the critique video, we need to think very carefully about why something is visually unappealing, as opposed to just identifying it as being ugly. And really, this is about how this visual aesthetic of the piece is impacting our experience. The first thing you might know about this, notice about this image, is that it lacks a central point of focus. Look at it for a little bit and see if you can draw your attention to one central point. It does contain a title and uses a variety of graphics that are trying to tell us something. What that something is not immediately apparent, but perhaps if we started to look for longer. You'll also notice that there's the use of several different colors, which are not necessarily complementary, which also are calling for our attention. These elements, combined with the lack of balance and symmetry in the composition, for example, where's the middle of this piece, cause this image to be distracting and make it difficult for the viewer to settle their focus on the important information. Now, what I'm trying to emphasize with this is the most troubling aspect of this image is not so much that it's visually unappealing, but that the way that it has been designed is actually interfering with the message. If we look at the same information presented in a different way, we can see how a simpler approach that uses elements of line, movement, and color and follows design principles of scale, balance, and contrast allow the viewer to focus their attention on the important information. In this case, this is a title slide for a presentation, so the title has been scaled to be larger than the other text on the screen. The green color found in the other image has been used for the purpose of contrast and identifies a separation of different topics to be discussed. Finally, the images have been removed altogether. This helps to avoid visual clutter or distraction. Now, while determining whether or not the second image looks nice is dependent on your definition of nice, the important distinction between these two images is that the one on the left creates confusion, whereas the one on the right uses visual elements that do not interfere with the intended message. This is important. If we design artifacts that don't follow basic principles, the visual aesthetic of the artifact actually interferes with the message that is trying to be communicated. This is why having an understanding of visual design, even to a limited extent, is tremendously important in the creation of objects. Now, the next thing to think about is, how does digital technology support visual design? And this is where we start to talk about the role of multiple mediums. While graphic design and visual design have been in existence for thousands of years, what's interesting to note is that graphic and visual design elements such as typography and illustration have been in existence for thousands of years. However, it's only recently that designers have had the capacity to use multiple mediums in their work to support them as they try to communicate information. A key aspect of the contribution that digital technology makes is that it is relatively easy to copy, manipulate, and share digital content. Using industry standards for imagery, photography, and video also allows for seamless convergence of these different mediums. Well, mostly seamless. The result of which is that we can now take content, manipulate it, and share it with a greater degree of ease than was previously possible. This makes the design artifact appeal to multiple senses and allows it to be more powerful. An example of the effectiveness of digital mediums in visual communication can be found in this week's case study, which is the baby walking video, which demonstrates how digital technology allows for the convergence of multiple mediums and, as you will see, ultimately enhances the original footage. Now, I'm going to ask you to hold on before you go away and look at the video of the baby, as we have a couple more questions that we need to take a look at. But please make sure you do take a look at this video. Now, the next thing to think about is what role does emotion play in media experiences and learning? What we think about here is that the integration of digital technology with effective design that is visual allows for a multimedia experiences that taps into multiple senses. This is important because we know that the more senses that are stimulated in the experience, the more likely an individual is going to remember that experience. Essentially, emotion plays an important role in learning. Now, when we think about the designer's primary goal, it's then to create an experience which facilitates the viewer's emotion. This is why elements such as the psychology of color and the connotation of typography, as well as the use of movement, can elicit specific emotions in people. These are the things that we need to take into consideration when creating visual design pieces. Now, if we look at this text as an example, as it is, it's a little bit difficult to identify the point that is being emphasized. It would be a lot worse if we had 1,000 pictures on top of the text. But as it is, we're not really sure exactly what we should be focusing on. Now, what would happen if we added a little bit of color? Not so much. Perhaps it was the wrong color. Let's add a different color. There we go. So with a little bit of color, we've now added an emphasis or a point of focus for the viewer. Now, what if we decided to use a different typography? In this case, we can change from Arial to Trajan Pro, and it provides a greater degree of emphasis. Now, if we decided to use the principles of movement and scale, we can add to the emphasis of this word. By making slight adjustments to the property of just one word, we can direct the viewer's attention to specific pieces of information. It's important to note here that it would be possible to overdo this. This is where you see graphics where words are spinning out of control. This is why designers need to show some restraint and find balance in the visual representation of information. So this leads us to our next question, which is what is the role of continuity in design artifacts? Simply stated, continuity is the use of similar elements across multiple mediums or artifacts. This could include the use of a font, the same colors, the same images, or the same formatting or layout. Often this is achieved through the use of a theme, which is persistent throughout all of the information that is presented. You may have noticed, for example, that in the videos for this course, the same color blue is used for all of the icons, as well as the same text. The videos also use the exact same layout with a consistent header. This helps to establish a consistent theme or visual aesthetic of the presentations. An archetypal example of continuity in design artifacts is McDonald's. You all know the symbol, and if we'd never eaten there before, you'd still know what it means. The golden arches is something that's used by McDonald's as a trademark. It can be found on all of their products. The same symbol can be found in the store window as is on the carton of the Big Mac. The yellow in the symbol is also consistent in all elements of the McDonald's branding. You can see it in the commercials, the logo, the furniture, and it's the exact same hue, saturation, and shade of yellow in all different mediums. What happens here is that this creates a sense of familiarity for the viewer, so that regardless of where they are or when they are, they can recognize the McDonald's brand, which, if they've ever eaten at McDonald's before or seen a McDonald's commercial, creates an emotion that relates to experiences that they've had with the brand. Now, although you may not be creating a global brand, the design elements that you can use are the same. So continuity plays an essential role in creating a visual aesthetic that is consistent. So following from the examples provided, the McDonald's one and the baby walking video, we can see how the use of multiple mediums as well as design principles can contribute to the emotional nature of a visual design experience. As you move forward in the process of creating your own design artifacts, there's a few things that I'd like you to take into consideration. The first thing is we need to think about what creative assets you need to create and what assets you can curate. Do you need to create a color palette that you can then use across multiple mediums? Is there a particular font that you can use that will help you to communicate some of the implicit messages that you are trying to get across? If you're doing a larger project, would you benefit from consistent icons or symbols that would help to establish continuity? And most importantly, do all of these things need to be created from scratch, or do they already exist and you can use them? This ties into the second question, which is what prior knowledge or experience do you have that would be beneficial in creating your assets? In this process, you should give consideration to the prior experiences that you've had with design. Maybe you've had none, and that's fine as well. But perhaps there's a specific program that you use on a regular basis that might be able to help you. Instead of learning a new program from scratch, it's good to start with what you know and build from there. It's also important to think about what programs you'll need in order to accomplish your design goals. This leads to the next question, which is what knowledge and experience do you need to acquire in order to help you in creating your assets? As noted, there's going to be some things that you already know how to do, but there will be other things that you don't know how to do. So it's likely that in some of your design solutions, you're going to need to learn some things, such as how to use different programs or tools. Now, you don't have to do this all on your own. A second component of this is to identify other people who may already have some of those skills or knowledge that you're trying to acquire and enlist them to help you. The fourth question is a little bit different, but also relatively important when we're thinking about creating design artifacts, and is something that we'll talk more about next week. However, I want to put it on your radar as you move forward. And that is, how does copyright impact your ability to use an asset that somebody else has created? This is important, and it's not something that should be taken lightly. You should familiarize yourself with copyright guidelines in the course resources, and you're encouraged to identify the copyright of any image, brand, font, icon, symbol, etc. that you use in your design work. A key principle here when dealing with copyright is that if you're unsure, don't use it. It's better to avoid making the mistake and perhaps create your assets from scratch if you are not sure of where the assets come from. So that's it for this video. I want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free, as usual, to email me at the email on the screen, or better yet, post your question to the Edmodo community where it can be responded to by your peers and the course facilitators.
Thanks for watching the Week 5 Context.